Hi, everyone. This is Sam Silverman, Managing Partner of EB-5AN. Thank you for taking time to join us on today's webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing EB-5 source of funds with a focus on investors from Africa and specifically Ethiopia. During the webinar, if you have questions and you'd like to chat with our team or our guest panelist, please reach out to us. Contact details are there on this page. And we can also provide a copy of the slides used during the webinar as well. Here's a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. Quick introduction about EB-5AN. We'll introduce our guest panelist, Maitreya Brown, an accomplished immigration attorney. We'll discuss source of funds considerations generally and specifically for Ethiopian investors. We'll go through a case study, and then we'll talk about some more unique situations and aspects for investors from Ethiopia. And then we'll wrap up with a few minutes talking about current urban and rural TEA available EB-5 projects. A little bit about EB-5AN. We're a leading EB-5 investment fund manager. We've worked with thousands of investors from more than 60 countries. We have more than 10 approved regional centers that cover the United States. This is a map showing where many of our prior EB-5 investors have resided over the years. Most importantly here is that people of many nationalities and backgrounds have consistently found value in our investment approach to the EB-5 visa program. This is a map showing many of our USCIS approved EB-5 regional centers. We cover the entire continental United States along with Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., which allows us to identify the most compelling rural and urban TEA projects around the country without any geographical restrictions. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Sam Silverman, one of the two managing partners at EB-5AN. My background and bio is there on the left-hand side, and a little bit about my partner there, Michael Schoenfeld on the right. And now it's my pleasure to have our guest panelist, Maitreya Brown, an EB-5 immigration attorney with extensive experience who's taken time out of her day to join us and share her experience working with EB-5 investors both already in the United States and abroad. And she has a large clientele from Africa, many of those investors being Ethiopian. So thank you, Maitreya, again for taking time today. And yeah, please introduce yourself and share a little bit about your experience working with EB-5 investors.
Sure. So first and foremost, thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. I am the founding and managing attorney at Direct U.S. Immigration, which is a prominent immigration firm in the D.C. metropolitan area, specializing in investment, employment, and family-based immigration. I have been practicing immigration for almost a decade, and I have worked extensively with large U.S. corporations, trillion-dollar financial institutions, and diverse startup organizations across so many different industries. You name it, I've very likely worked in it. My background, I'm recognized with a couple regional and national top 40 under 40 awards, as well as the Emerging Women Leaders Law, the Emerging Women Leaders in Law Award. And then I also do teach legal education to immigration attorneys. I do pro bono work and contribute to legal outlets such as Bloomberg Law and Law 360.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So before we jump into the very specific topic of source of funds for Ethiopian investors, let's start kind of with a more general discussion and talk about source of funds generally. What is source of funds? How does it fit in with EB-5? And why is it so important that this component of an investor's application is really well thought through and put together by someone who has enough experience, to recognize, common issues that may come up, documents that are required. What is this and why is it needed for EB-5?
So the source of funds, very frequently, sorry, let me start that over. So the source of funds, also known as the SOF, is the documentation of an EB-5 investor's lawful source of investment capital. It's basically the U.S. government's way of making sure that the funds have been lawfully obtained. So per USCIS requirements, an EB-5 investor must invest his or her own capital, establish that they are the legal owner of the capital invested and they obtained that capital through lawful means, and document the path of the funds to establish that the investment was made or is actively in the process of being made. Now, there are two requirements or components of an I-526E petition, which is for that, EB-5 case, which first is the project documentation explaining how the investment satisfies that EB-5 criteria, and second is the source of funds evidence showing that the investment capital is eligible. So USCIS has to approve both components for the I-526E to be approved, and again, and with that criteria, you need, first and foremost, that the investment amount meets the EB-5 requirements, the investment capital was lawfully obtained, the capital was invested in a new commercial enterprise, also known as an NCE. The NCE will create the required number of jobs, and the investor is actively involved in the NCE. Now, it's very important to ensure that the source of funds documentation is completed before wiring funds to the project or even submitting the I-526E petition, because you want to make sure that you are in fact eligible for this EB-5 visa and eventual green card before moving those funds into the investment.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So obviously, investors have a wide variety of potential sources that they can use to demonstrate that their funds have been obtained legally. So let's walk through, just at a very high level, the four main types of sources that you see when working with an investor.
Absolutely. So you've got ordinary income, and that is money earned either by the investor or spouse. You've got capital gains, which is money earned by the investor or spouse from the sale of an asset for a gain on investment. You've got gifts or inheritance from family or friends. So that is exactly what it sounds like. It's money gifted outright with no expectation of repayment to the investor or spouse, or funds willed to the investor or spouse. And then the last one is loans from family or friends or companies. And this is money lent to the investor or spouse at market terms from a third party with or without collateral. And of course, it's super important to make sure that the money that you do earn or is given to you is lawful, and you are paying taxes on it, whether those taxes are due inside of the U.S. or outside in a foreign country.
Got it. Okay, so now let's dig in more detail. We'll first cover best practices, and then common problems for each of those four. So starting with ordinary income best practices, what are some of the things that investors really need to make sure that they have organized?
Sure. So with ordinary income, you want to identify whether the income is earned through self-employment, so a sole proprietorship, or third-party employment, and the documentation changes significantly based on who the investor's employer is. So I would say one of the easiest is a third-party employer, and you can show that you are earning through pay stubs, employment contract or confirmation letter, also known as an employment verification letter, bank statements showing accumulation and maintenance of those funds, and then you've also got self-employment. Now this can be, a lot more to dig up. So with self-employment, typically source of funds utilized So this is typically source of funds utilized to start the business. So you can include sample contracts, invoice or purchase orders, business bank statements, personal bank statements, and then you need to document the accumulation and maintenance of the needed funds.
Perfect. All right, so what are some of the problems that do come up?
Sure. So, some of the problems are, translations of foreign documents, providing appropriate taxes, proving that appropriate taxes have been paid, and tracing from source to current account. So when translating foreign documents, you want to make sure that those translations are certified because, of course, it's not always that every single document is in English, so you want to make sure that everything is translated. And that can include employment records, salary certificate, proof of dividend distributions, bank statements, tax returns, etc. For proving the appropriate taxes have been paid, that would include tax returns showing income from all sources. So again, proof that taxes have been paid or withheld, and the amount of after-tax funds matches the amount of funds remaining in the respective accounts. This is super important because if there is a gap or if it's off, USCIS will really dig into this. And then also the tracing from the source of the funds to the current account. So bank records showing after-tax funds first entering the EB-5 investor's account and then moving from that account to a different account and however many accounts until it reaches the EB-5 investment, and preferably without commingling with other funds. Now, that's the ideal, but realistically that does not always happen. So that can be a common problem. Some of the questions that USCIS is really interested in is, how and when did you earn this money? What services were you paid to perform? What taxes did you pay? Where have the after-tax funds been since you earned them until today? So this is really what USCIS is looking for.
And can you talk a little bit more about appropriate taxes being paid, and how does that kind of come up with funds being brought from overseas? Obviously, taxes are different in Africa than they are here. So how does the government know what the right tax is and that it's been paid?
Absolutely. So, of course, every immigration officer that's reviewing the case is different and sometimes will require different pieces of information. But generally speaking, you want to show proof that taxes have been paid through tax statements. And then also, if there's some type of governmental website that confirms what the tax structure is, then that's also helpful to include as well. Each case, of course, the type of evidence that is required is on a case-by-case basis. So we just, kind of take it case by case to determine, what's really necessary for that specific investor.
Okay, that's very helpful. Okay, so next up is capital gains.
Sure. So with capital gains, the focus is on the initial principal investment made in assets. So that can include real property, equity, fixed deposits, etc. So real property, with that, you want to properly document the income used to fund the purchase of the property. Now, if capital gains were received from real estate flipping, you will need to provide purchase and sale deeds and corresponding bank statements of all properties leading up to the property sold to fund the EB-5 investment. So whether it's just one property or a slew of properties, you need to make sure that your documentation is organized. And then also in terms of a sale of company, you basically want to trace back the funds to the initial investment and the investor's company. And you must prove that the source of funds from the inception of the company, together with tax returns and financial statements for that company for the last, 7 years or however long that company has been in existence. It's really important to document proper registration and lawful activity of the company, and you must provide sales agreements and corresponding bank statements reflecting receipt of sale of the sales proceeds. Now, sometimes, people are unsure about, well, my company is, 15 years old and I don't have, I may not have proof of that, of the funds that initially went into the company. You basically want to prepare as much direct evidence as possible to show proof of lawful funds. And then for, years that are maybe outside of, document retention policies or anything like that, you basically want to find indirect pieces of evidence. So for example, a sale of a company. Maybe there's a news article about the sale of that company, and that can be used as, indirect evidence. So there's a lot of different ways that you can show that, that the funds are lawful. Affidavits can also be helpful, but sometimes a lot of the time, USCIS will put much lower weight to an affidavit versus, something that's like a bank statement or a deed or something like that. So, so generally, to show and to provide source of funds on a very first real estate purchased or company, that's opened is really important, even if it's outside of that document retention period. And even if, the sale or the purchase is made in cash, it's really important to make sure that the cash that was paid for that asset came from a lawful source. So, examples of showing that it came from a lawful source is having a copy of the ID of the individual who paid for it in cash, and then where that cash came from, where it was held, and then, the fact that it was actually used to, purchase the company or purchase the real estate.
Got it. Okay, so it's not just about the most recent transaction, but you really have to look back in time and see where the funds originally came from to acquire the asset before it was more recently sold.
Exactly. USCIS can go back, decades if they want. So it's just really important to document as much as you have.
Okay. And so what are some of the common problems, issues that you see, and how do you deal with situations where, maybe the exact document that you'd want to show isn't available?
Sure. So if the exact document you want to show is not available, that's kind of when you go into indirect evidence. So so like I said, for example, the sale of a company or the sale of a house, if for some reason that, the bank no longer has the bank statements of selling a home, you can show when you have the deed and then the new deed with the new individual's name. Obviously, it's likely if a property has, one person's name on it and then another person's name on it later, it's likely that the property was probably sold. So just indirect, pieces of evidence that can really, I guess, paint the story of what happened, in addition to language of what exactly happened, and then, and then evidence, as best of evidence as you can to support, what exactly happened.
Okay. All right. So next up is gifts or inheritance. What are some of the things that you see with those items in terms of source of funds?
Sure. So, gifts, inheritance from family or friends, you basically need to establish that the investor is the rightful heir of that asset, and document how the initial asset was purchased by the donor. So for evidence of inheritance, you can always provide a will when available, and if no will exists, so if that person passes away intestate, then provide local rules of that intestate succession, and that can be shown through, of course, the death certificate that shows that the individual has passed, but also, court records, a copy of the will, maybe an affidavit from the attorney that was, dealing with that, with the inheritance issue. So just, as much evidence as you can surrounding that. And then in terms of the source of funds, you want to provide evidence of how the inherited property was acquired by the donor. So again, this evidence can be in the form of sworn affidavits from the donor and or third parties with knowledge of, how the funds were obtained, and that, they bought, this piece of property or this business, and just the entire story around that. So, so in terms of, showing that you received a gift or an inheritance, what's most important, again, is showing that, the person in fact is deceased through a death certificate, whether there's a will or not, that will or court documentation, as well as the fact that that individual, and the will, or the court documentation absolutely shows that, that prospective, EB-5 visa holder is in fact the true heir to that, inheritance, so the piece of property or whatever else. A lot of questions that we do receive are, can they take out a loan or borrow using, their inheritance as collateral? And in short, yes. Say you inherit a piece of property, so a multifamily unit or an apartment building or hotel or something. You can use that as collateral against a loan that you're seeking in order to invest that money into the EB-5 investment. It's very, very important to ensure that that EB-5 investment itself is not the collateral, because that will not allow this type of case to be approved.
Got it. Okay. And what about some of the common issues that you see there?
Sure. So, the common issues are pretty similar across a lot of them. So again, making sure that those foreign documents are translated, certified translations of any non-English documents, proving that the appropriate taxes have been paid, whether those taxes are required to be paid in the U.S. or outside of the U.S., just, ensuring that there's evidence of that. And then again, tracing, those path of funds from the source to the current account. So that's, that can sometimes, be very messy, but I would say that's probably one of the most difficult parts for some cases to show where the money kind of traveled until it finally got to the investment.
Got it. Okay. All right. And then loans. What do people need to know about loans if they're going to borrow money and use that borrowed capital to partially fund their investment?
Sure. So a personal loan, has to have terms comparable to that of a commercial bank loan. So in case of a loan from a person or a non-financial institution, the lender must provide documentation of source of funds. So again, if a friend, is loaning you, 500,000 and another friend is loaning another 300,000 or 400,000, both of those individuals who are loaning you that money must confirm that the money that they received, that they're giving to you, came from a lawful source. So, source of funds of the collateral asset. So providing evidence of how the investor acquired that asset used as collateral. So an ideal option is to acquire an uncollateralized loan from a financial institution because that basically avoids the issue of proving the source of the collateral. Now this is definitely easier said than done because it's not always easy to find a loan that does not require collateral, but it's definitely something that you can do. Another piece is to think about the source of funds of that lender. So when borrowing from a company, you do need to provide evidence of the establishment and lawful operations of that company, evidence of the investor's ownership of the company, if applicable, and value of the investor's ownership, financial status of the company, including tax returns and financial statements. So basically, USCIS wants to know that the lender does have a lawful business that they're running. Basically, they're not laundering money through, a fake company to then provide it to the EB-5 investor to then invest in an EB-5 investment. That will quickly, get your case denied. Another, thing to look at is the document. So you want to submit evidence of ownership of that collateral. So a valuation report of the collateral asset and proof of the ability of lender to foreclose in case of non-payment of loan. So again, you're basically just showing that this is in fact a real loan where if you do not pay it back, there will be consequences.
Got it. Okay, so let's wrap up with just some of the common issues. And I know we've talked about some of these already. So yeah, what are some of the main highlight ones to be aware of?
Yeah, so loans from family, friends, companies, again, common problems, making sure that all of your, documents are translated. I can't say it enough because I do, still receive a lot of documents from clients who, where those certain documents just are not translated. And they know they should be. Another thing is, again, proving that you have paid, the appropriate taxes, whether in the US or outside, and then again, tracing those funds from the source to that current account.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so now we'll walk through a case study that incorporates a few of these different concepts and kind of illustrates what a real life situation that involves a loan secured by real estate could look like. So I know this chart is a little bit overwhelming at first, but maybe let's go numerically in order, 1, 2, 3, and so on, and yeah, just kind of walk us through this situation and what different documents are going to be needed to kind of provide that evidence for each of the pieces.
Sure. So first and foremost, you do need to prove who the investor is. That is through the passport, birth certificate, driver's license. Second is you want to prove that there's a real asset. So the current appraisal showing that the asset is worth more than the loan amount. And then third is to prove that the investor actually has it. So the source of funds used to purchase the asset or inheritance documents showing how the title has passed. Now, after that, you kind of want to go into proving that there is a market transaction. So, you've got a loan agreement, a recorded mortgage in the public record, personal guarantee, a note, and a clear path to foreclose on the asset in case of a default. And then you do want to prove that it is a legal business. So, business incorporation documents, FEIN, operating agreement, et cetera, just, whatever shows that, that business is a legal business and has the required certificates and everything needed to allow that business to conduct business in a lawful way. And then also, you want to prove who the lender is. So again, similar to proving who the investor is, you want to show a copy of the passport, birth certificate, driver's license, and then lastly, you want to prove funds were legally earned from third parties for services and taxes have been paid on it. So, evidence that you might want to include are annotated bank statements, and invoices for services provided, service contracts, Form 1040 returns, state tax returns if applicable. Again, it's really case specific and company specific.
Okay, and so all these documents need to be arranged and kind of elegantly conveyed to USCIS. So how does that piece of the application fit in with the immigration attorney, and how do you kind of explain everything and make sure that someone else can wrap their head around what happened in a nice logical fashion?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you initially look at, what is an EB-5 visa online, and you think, oh, it's just, these specific things, that's easy. But when you look on the USCIS website, it doesn't always show, the specific documents that are required because, again, it's very case specific. So it's really important to, speak with your client to really understand where the money is coming from and how it's being moved so that you can really craft the case specifically to their investment, their endeavor. So in terms of crafting, the cover letter, the source of funds, a lot of other, information that's required, it's important to ensure that the information is very neatly and prepared, very organized so that the officer that's reviewing the case is not confused. The last thing we want is the officer to be very confused and to, just elicit a RFE that has a ton of questions. So first and foremost, just making sure that, we understand the client, what they want to do, their work, what they want to invest in, and then, understanding where the money, is coming from. Obviously, a lot of the clients, they already know exactly where the money is coming from. It's already pooled, in an account. Other clients, they're open. They ask, what's the best way to get the money? We have money pooled, but we also have friends in the U.S. Who are willing to lend us money for, of course, repayment. So we can also guide, what is the easiest and or I guess EB-5 is not easy per se because it's a lot of steps, but what is the best way to prepare an application so that it's it's your best foot forward in terms of filing.
Got it. Okay. And here's a breakdown. Again, this is for illustrative purposes, just to get an idea of the scope of documents and detail that's going to go into one of these filings. And again, it will vary based on the source of funds for that specific investor, but this is kind of a general list of some of the documents that that would be needed. Okay, so let's get a little bit specific here and talk about how some of these documents will need to be adjusted, or new documents will be needed to be added with respect to investors from Africa, and specifically Ethiopian investors. What are some of the things that you've seen come up in your practice with investors applying from Ethiopia or bringing funds from Ethiopia?
Absolutely. So there's a very unique situation going on in Ethiopia. There's always a lot, kind of going on. So a lot of the time there is limitation to acquiring US dollars in country and the inability to transfer Ethiopian birr out of Ethiopia. So due to Ethiopia's strict currency controls, directives, and policies, it's become very, very difficult to transfer ETB out of Ethiopia. Of course, there are exceptions. Those exceptions include businesses with offshore accounts investing in strategic areas where the funds are used to settle payments on certain expenses. Now, these strategic areas include public-private partnership, power generation, and infrastructure projects with large-scale capital investment, large-scale mining projects with substantial export potential, and infrastructure projects. Additionally, other foreign investments may be eligible based on their strategic importance and potential for foreign exchange earnings, employment creation, technology transfer, and import substitution ability. Now, approved payment types include capital expenses, insurance, contractors, maintenance and operation expenses, and external debt services. Now, of course, this is an exception to the strict, policy controls within Ethiopia's, financial institutions. But realistically, how many individuals are actually in these strategic areas? And if they are they even able to, get those funds out of country? So, the big question, the million-dollar question is, how can Ethiopian investors transfer and or acquire US dollars to contribute to EB-5 projects without jumping through policy hoops and paying, outrageous exchange rates? And I've seen it done, kind of two different ways. I would say most of my clients, a lot of them have U.S. business associates who are willing to loan that amount needed at, of course, market return rates, and then, in time, they get paid back. And then I have a smaller subset of, clients who have businesses in Ethiopia as well as countries outside of Ethiopia. And what they do is they use the funds from the business that's outside of that's outside of Ethiopia to then transfer those funds into the US, because it depending on the country, it's much easier transferring that than the Ethiopian birr. So overall, I would say the easiest way would be to have a, US business associate that's willing to loan that amount to, our Ethiopian clients to be able to get that EB-5 visa.
Got it. Okay. All right. That makes sense. All right. We're now going to shift gears. We'll quickly discuss a few available rural and urban TEA projects, and then we'll dive into some details about just what the documentation process looks like and how investors can get started. So currently we have 3 different rural TEA projects and 2 urban TEA offerings. At a high level, the rural projects tend to be a little bit more popular because they have faster processing and a larger 20% reserve visa set aside, which means investors, particularly those from higher volume countries like China and India, will be able to get their green cards years faster than selecting some of these urban projects, which don't have those advantages. So on the rural TEA side, we currently have 3 different offerings. One is our Twin Lakes, Georgia project, a large single-family home project outside of Atlanta, substantial completion, thousands of jobs already in place, and 2 prior funds with 956F approvals and 1 with I-526Cs as of now. Second project is our Kindred Resort at Keystone. This is a hotel condominium project located in Keystone, Colorado, prime location right next to the primary river run gondola at the Vail Managed Ski Resort. A lot of the condominiums are already sold and already over 1,200 EB-5 eligible jobs already created. And then last rural project is our Walhalla, Utah project, also structured as a loan with hundreds of jobs already created and 956F and I-526C approvals in place already as well. Then shifting to our urban project, this is a single project, 210 unit apartment building targeting the 55 and up active adult market. We have 2 different offerings. So we have an equity option, which has a much higher preferred return of 5% per year, and a loan option, which has a 3+1 year loan period. So slightly different flavors, but the same underlying investment. Both the Boynton Beach projects and the Twin Lakes project above are being developed by Coulter. They're one of the largest private developers in the US. They've developed almost $30 billion of development over the last 25 plus years. Perfect track record. And we've done over 15 successful EB-5 projects with them to date. All right, so I think to kind of conclude today's webinar, Maitreya, could you share a little bit about how you work with individual EB-5 investors? What does that process look like? How long does it take usually? They sign one contract and then you help them with part of the application or the whole application. How does that whole process look? And what do investors need to know before starting to work with you on one of these applications?
Absolutely. So I guess from ground level, from start, first it's most important to make sure you kind of have an idea of what you're interested in. And if you're not sure what you're interested in investing in, either an amount that you might be interested in investing in, and then also ensuring that you actually have the funds, and ensuring that you have evidence, proof of those funds. So we would schedule a consultation with, our prospective client, and we'll just kind of, talk to them to understand what they're interested in doing, and just basically just where their interest lies, as well as providing them with an understanding of the EB-5 visa in general, the path to the green card, the fact that once you do get the green card, you still, there's still additional things to do after that, just so that they understand holistically the entire process. If they are interested in moving forward, we'll sign an initial contract to really, review the source of funds and making sure that we can document all of it, so that, it's very much an approvable case for, USCIS to approve. Once we are able to document the source of funds, making sure that it's all from lawful activity, and of course evidence that it's from lawful activity, they then contact EB-5AN to basically invest in whichever project that they want to invest in. Depending on how hands-on, the investor is, you can always, it's so important to do due diligence. Look up the area, go to the site, enter the US on a visitor visa, check it out, just see how you feel about it. Once you are happy with, the type of investment you want to invest in, you then, transfer the funds to, the escrow, and then, notify us. And then from there, we prepare the application to file. Once the application is prepared and filed, we monitor the case from start to finish. If any RFEs or requests for evidence are elicited, we take care of that. We basically do all of the heavy lifting for you. Of course, the client's initial heavy lifting is basically providing as much evidence as possible about, the lawful funds. But once they get all of that together, we do, all of the heavy lifting for them after that. And, to contact us, you can call us at 888-853-4833. You can email us inquiry@directusimmigration.com, or you can check out our website and schedule a consultation there. That's also www.directusimmigration.com.
All right, great. Thank you very much. And any questions related to the projects, please reach out to us at EB5investments.com. You can scan this QR code and schedule a call. But anything immigration related, source of funds, questions about eligibility, adjusting status, all those questions, please reach out to Maitreya, and she'll be able to help answer those and get you on the right track. Great. Thank you very much again for taking time to join us today.
All right. Thank you. And bye-bye.